Welcome to the Foil Life Podcast, where we talk about foiling and the lifestyles of those who enjoy these great sports.
Mr. Hopline, it's great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Happy to be here. Been waiting for it, to be honest.
Your stuff has been popping up on my Instagram feed, I guess our Instagram feed with the podcast for quite a while.
Oh, that's good.
And
good to hear.
Yeah, and it's just cool to finally meet you and then talk about some of the things behind the scene that I'm sure you've experienced and enjoyed as you've gone more and more and more into the influencer
Which
world.
Is an expression I don't really like. It's they call it's so close because if you're talking about an influencer, everybody knows what you're talking about. But if you say, hey, I'm an inspirator or something, this is what comes closer to what I would like to do. People don't get it. I mean, it's called influencer, which is not, we're not influencing, at least I'm not trying to influence anyone, but I guess we are, so yeah.
Well, inspiring is a good way of looking at it, because I think that's the transference of passion and the transference of joy from one person to another, which might be more in line with what all of us are actually trying to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. How did the thought process go to start this Hopline?
It's been like my whole life. I wanted to do something with surfing. I got hooked at the age of 19. I think I wanted to become a pro surfer, but I started way too late and I kind of missed the window of becoming a professional athlete. And then I kind of bounced around it for a very long time. I studied industrial design. I was making surfboards. I was always related to the surf industry somehow, but not really working for it. And then I've done so many things. I worked as industrial designer as an agency in Frankfurt. I was with two colleagues of mine. We were having like a proper setup in Frankfurt. Dropped out of that, worked as a travel blogger for quite a while, and then came back, worked at the water sports station, teaching boat license, giving wakeboard courses and stuff like that. And then at some point I saw a tiny window, and at the same time me getting older and not that sportive anymore. And I was like, I have to do this. And I don't really like social media because I think, like we said before, it's influencing and it's got a lot of bad aspects as well. But it gives people like me who are not top athletes the chance to be part of that as well and to do what you like and what you're like absolutely passionate about. And reach out to the people, get some feedback, and maybe hopefully one day make a living from it.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Could we talk about a little bit about your channel? And
sure.
Yeah, because I just remember you're putting out some really good quality content. Let me hop over to your Hopline right here. Obviously, it's a good name. I think you were just blessed with a good last name that'll.
Ask my wife about it. She doesn't like it. When our first son, when she got pregnant for the first time, I was like, any chance we could call him Hip? Then it would be like hip hop. But she was like, no way. And I was like, what about a second name? So we came up with Flynn, and then I was like, it could be Flynn Hip Hop. And that would be like absolutely hilarious. Like we didn't do it, but that's still a running joke. Now, but the funny thing is, I knew I wanted to do something for surfing, and I had to come up with a name. And I thought Hotline is pretty cool, and then I go for Hopline instead. And I think that was like almost 10, 15 years back when I registered all the domains. I went on Instagram and on YouTube and just typed in the name and blocked it and didn't do anything with it for at least more than 10 years. And then when I reached out and I was like, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the step, get out of my job and do it full time. I already had the whole name set up, and that's good because otherwise you end up with like Hopline 17x/ something.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I do love the name. I like the logo. It's nice and simple, but it does stand out. And because we've seen it, it's just cool to see that kind of infiltrate our entire world. Obviously, you see our content, we see your content. But one thing I am really curious about is how did this whole surfing kind of journey begin for you? And what would have made you so passionate about it to kind of enter into
That's
it?
I think every surfer's got like a little click moment where you get hooked, and it's a very special moment. And for me, I've always, I don't know why, because my parents don't surf. My uncle, he took me out on a windsurf board when I was 6 or 7. He just like had me sit on the board. I was holding onto the straps, and he would just go up and down in France on the lake. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I want to do that. I never really got into it. And then we went to France, south of France, on a family trip holiday, and I asked my parents if I could start surfing, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we get you something," and they bought me a plastic bodyboard, which was just it wasn't even like one of these foamies. It was like plastic, so it was like rubbing my belly, but still I was just bouncing around in the waves. No one teaching me what to do, but I knew, like catching the first wave, I was like, wow, I instantly felt kind of a connection to the ocean. And it took a really long time to actually go back to that, because I was, when you're landlocked in Germany, you don't have chances to go there anywhere. If you're, we get a driver's license when we are 18. And so the first thing I did when I got a driver's license, I got myself a surfboard. I hooked up with a friend. We bought an old car. We bought the same car they have in Endless Summer Part 2. And we drove all the way to the same spot there, surfing in Endless Summer
that's
Part
awesome.
2, just to find out that we got totally smashed by the shore break. We got like Malibus. We had no idea about surfing. We just rocked up on the beach. And I was like, yeah, I saw all these surfers. And I was like, oh, that looks easy. Just get up and surf. And we didn't even make it. We were trying for an hour and a half, and we didn't even make it through the shore break. We just got washed. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's cool. It's going to take a while. And then a couple of weeks later, in like some tiny mushy waves, I caught a whitewater wave, and then it turned green again. And I was surfing this green wave for the first time, and I was hooked. And ever since, like, every surfer is like, you're looking for a holiday, and that's going to be a surfing trip. And then everything turns into surfing. And that was, for me, during my studies, I think, where I surfed a lot. Like, you have periods where you can do a lot of homework, and I bought an old Volkswagen bus, and then I would just take whatever I had to do and just take it to the beach. I would go to the Netherlands for the weekends, and for 2 months to Portugal, Spain, France, and just surf every second I could.
You guys have access to so many countries over there with so much access to water, compared to, like, we're kind of landlocked as well, obviously, in central or eastern Canada. We got the Great Lakes, but there's nothing really good for surfing, which is why foiling, and we're more wind-related people, but foiling has turned into an amazing surfing mecca for us. Because, well, I guess where you are at home as well in Germany, I guess that'll turn a mediocre session into something pretty fun.
Yeah, it's not much surf here. Like, we have to travel, and it's a fair bit of a drive. Like, to go to France, where you get some decent swell and waves, it's at least a 10-hour ride. So it's just a little bit too much for the weekend. Nowadays, especially with the kids, it's a whole different story. But back in the days, I think the best thing I ever did, I went to Australia and stayed there for a few months, surfed every day, and then came back. And I was like, if I want to get into surfing, like proper prone surfing, and maybe catch some barrels, I have to do this for a longer period of time, pretty much every day. Mm-hmm. And then I applied for a scholarship in Australia, got it granted, and then I lived a year on the Gold Coast. And it was studying and surfing, but it was mainly surfing and studying. So I kind of shifted the focus, and that was where surfing really took off for me. If you got the confidence and if you go to like Snapper Rocks or something, it's a few hundred people in the lineup. And if you rock up as a German surfer, the first couple of weeks and months, you're not getting a single wave. You're just getting the leftovers down the line. And when I left, I was sitting there with the main crowd, getting a wave in between. And that was where I felt super confident in the water. And that was, still super hooked. And then foiling came along, just like you said, and that was a whole revolution. And now I can surf in my backyard, and just tiny tanker waves on a foil feel like a pounding shore break. And it's changing everything over here for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it changed everything for us as well, because we were going out in much bigger wind conditions that were starting to get a little precarious and a little dangerous, and it was getting, obviously our water gets cold. So with
Same
the
here, yeah.
onset of foiling, instead of us going in 40 knots, you would dial that down, but you would still have some decent swell, and then the feeling was insane. But I'm curious, so did you actually end up getting barreled?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah?
I still remember my
Shit.
first barrel, which was the first one was actually kind of by accident. I was on the national park and I was just taking a wave and it was just too fast. And I got barreled and I got spit out and I came out of the barrel and I was like, wow, that was a barrel. And it's like, it's funny because time seems to slow down while you're in the barrel. So it's only, I was in there for like a second or maybe a second and a half. But for me, it felt like an hour. I was like looking around, looking backwards and I was, oh, this is so, and the sound, like you can tell you're in the barrel when the sound changes because you got like the noise and then it becomes like all muffled and just it's like the whole audio just changes the second you're wrapped up. And then I was in there and I was like, oh, this is different, this is strange. And I kind of looked around and then I came out and I was like, oh, that's it, I've got a barrel. And I ran to the beach and I was like, did you guys see that? I was like in there for I don't know, like almost a minute. They're like, no. Everyone's like, no. I was like, yeah, you were in there, but that was like a second. And I was like, oh, crazy. And then yeah, it's cool.
Well, that's one of the things, obviously, that's on the list, but then there's, as you said, like it took you a year to get there?
Yeah, a year of
consistent.
Like, every day, 2 times.
Holy shit. Yeah, you'd have to live somewhere special for that.
You do.
And then obviously the conditions that you're surfing in, they have to be appropriate for that, right? They can't be too big, they can't be too small.
Exactly. And it's all about speed and commitment. Like if you have some proper swell, like I went to Bali and I had perfectly pounding waves, but they were just too hard for me. Like really massive over reef, massive swells. And I could have caught a barrel probably, but not sure if I would make it over the over the reef. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of it's a commitment, but at the same time you have to know your risk levels. Getting injured and getting the best session of your life are very close together. And if you're like me, when I came back from Australia, I did have a certain level of confidence, but then it was back to surfing and not surfing, like surfing for a couple of months and then going back. And then you kind of lose a little bit of that and you ease in once you get there. But every time you're surfing for another couple of weeks, you feel good and then it's almost time to go back. So it's like you said, if you're living at a spot, if you get to know the spot, if you get to know the wave, I think that's part of the whole thing. And it's difficult. And I think it's the same with foiling. Now we've got prone foiling, and I think that's even harder because if you don't have a surfing background, this is going to be so hard to learn for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I haven't dabbled in that yet because I just started prone surfing some baby waves on the west coast of Vancouver Island, so in Tofino area, so Long Beach, and so we would go there and surf, but it's just baby stuff and longboard just to kind of get myself used to it because we had never done it. But I'm curious about all your traveling. Like you've been all over the world, it seems, and there you did do a blog as well. Like I would like to learn a little bit more about that. So you keep us traveling. Where did that come from?
It was me and my wife. Back then, she was my girlfriend, and we were sitting. She was living in Frankfurt, and I was still running the agency with 2 other guys. And we were like on the trip of dropping out of work at 40 and then just relax. But that just it doesn't. At some point, I realized it's not going to happen because if you're living like a student life and you do the calculations on your student life. It just doesn't work out because you get kids, and I could tell the other ones they were making more money and they were getting fancier cars, bikes, bigger flats, and then you need to make more money so you're not dropping out at 40. And at some point I realized I don't want to work 24/7 on the weekends. I still want to have a life. And then one night we were sitting at the couch at my girlfriend's flat having a wine, and she was like, what would you do if money and all the obligations from outside were not a problem, if you could do whatever you wanted to do? And I was like, well, I would probably travel the world and just surf and do something good in terms of environmental work and social work. And she was like, oh yeah, that's what I would do too. And then I went back to work the next week and I quit. I just went to my 2 other guys and I was like, hell, you know what? It's not going to be now, but I'm going to drop out of this. And we have to find some sort of agreement. And they're still running the agency. So I think they're doing pretty good without me, probably. And I called my wife. She was a flight attendant and I think she was in California. And I was like, hey, I'm ready to go. Like, I quit my job. I dropped out of the agency and it's going to take a couple of weeks to get things settled. But we can sell everything we have and we can set up a website, do a travel blog, look for some social work and just start doing it. And she it took a few seconds to realize, but then she kept her job as a flight attendant for a couple of months and was on duty and off duty for a month and then a month off, months on. And then she quit her job as well. And we traveled for 2.5 years working on social micro projects and enjoying the world and surfing.
No way. So how'd you guys fund that? If you don't mind.
It's not really expensive. It depends on how you do it. If we were buying cars or we were trying to go really slow also in terms of your environmental footprint. So we would rely on public transport. We did a lot of hitchhiking. We were staying in cheap local accommodations, or we would buy a camper van and then just live in the camper van and sell it for probably the same amount of money if you do some little fixes and reparations to it. So it was super inexpensive. And she had a work and travel visa for Australia. And she worked for 7 weeks, and that was enough to cover the 2.5 years of expenses. So that was just ridiculous. So we came.
Good for you guys.
We tried some crowdfunding through the blog and do some ads or something, but we really never got into getting money out of it. And that was not the main focus. We were more focused on really, not just having a good time, but also trying to give something back. So we would, do some social projects, and wherever we could, we like really help in different countries of the world. We would just offer things. We had in Sumatra, I had a little guide, and he was like a local, and he had no access to the internet, but he was offering jungle tours, and he was actually feeding his family by picking up tourists in the bus. So he would just go in random buses, see if he could find some tourists and talk to them, because he had no website, nothing. And he would just try to get clients, and he would only get one in a fortnight. But he was feeding his family. And I was like, well, if you have any form of contact, and he was really nice. I make a nice video, I put it online. I just need some sort of contact. So we set up an email address for him. He could check on the internet cafe once in a while, so people could get in touch with him. And he got back to me. We made that reel and we put it online, and he got back to me 5 years later, and he's like, well, that changed my business. He's got a website, and he's still got that old video on his website. And he said he had a lot more clients. So it's a micro project. It's just affecting one single person, but that was one person we met. That was really nice. And I knew I could just help him a little bit. And he invited us to his family. We had dinner with him, and that was very, very special to us.
So that was the premise of that trip.
Yeah, but that's just one example of things we did.
Sure.
We did like that wherever we went. And because we were traveling so slow, I think that the biggest benefit we had was not having any flights or any schedule. We would just go. And if you just meet a person, if you walk into a random person, they said, hey, I've got something I want to show you, and you don't have a schedule, you can just go. You can just say, okay, well, we're going to that island for how long? Like, or 6 weeks? Okay, yeah, let's go. Because you don't have a flight. And I think that was one of the best decisions we made, not to book anything in advance. We just went from country to country. We do have the hassle of getting a visa now and then, or you have to get out of a country because of the visa regulations. But that was something we really enjoyed, not being on a race, not trying to see super many countries or the main tourist attractions, but just going. Like we did the whole Sumatra, Java, Bali, Malaysia, Singapore, all the Asian things, Borneo, Malaysia, and then Australia and some other islands. So we didn't see that much in terms of countries. but we did it like really slow and really got to know a lot of local people. And that's what was really, really important to me and my wife.
That's very un-German, like who like everything organized and structured.
It is.
I'm proud of you. I'm very proud of you for breaking that.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's so funny because you do meet Germans all around the world, and they are always on a schedule. They are always like, and they say like, I talked to this local yesterday, and he told me we could go there, and if we get like a fisherman taking us to this island or something, and they're like, yeah, but are we going to be back in 2 weeks? And I was like, not sure. Like, I don't even know, and they can't go because they have a flight or a train or something to catch. They booked into a cooking course in Bali. Yeah, so it's different approaches, and everyone's got something that makes them happy. And for us, it was just being as free and independent as possible.
Yeah, that's a beautiful period that you're able to do that. I don't know if there's very many people that actually get to experience that level of going with the flow or freedom on this planet, because normally it ends up being a rat race or financial obligations or other obligations or chasing a carrot that you should be investing rather than enjoying. Like a lot of the times you should be focusing more so on growing something and living a very modest life rather than showing it off. But everything is about showing it off, I find. Especially. Yeah, especially in the influencer world, less so enjoying. And that's why I'm asking these questions, because I am curious to get to more of the heart of why Hopline started and existed. And I think it's only the mission of Hopline comes out more as we get to know you more and we get to know these kind of amazing trips and stuff that you've done. Are there any other, that's an amazing example of what you would have done for him. Are there any other kind of highlights of that would have stood out?
There's so many highlights. Like
I can imagine.
There's a lot of people, but also a lot of environmental things. We found a turtle that was trapped in the reef, and we freed. Like I went out snorkeling, and it was trapped up in like some fisher net and stuck to the reef. So we dived down several times, cut it open, and then I carried it out into deeper water and just let it go. And it kind of turned around, or I kind of imagined it turned around and said goodbye, like waving goodbye. So that was something. It's just the tiny things, and there's so many of them. In Western Australia, we bought a 4-wheel drive, and we did like some massive independent 3.5 weeks 4-wheel drive trips without seeing anyone. And then we bumped into some people from the government counting animals in the nowhere. And I asked them, hey, can I just volunteer and just help you guys? And they were like, yeah, we set up a lot of traps and we're catching animals, and we go out in the morning, and then we see how many of each species we can find. And because they have been in the trap for a couple of days, they feed them and then let them go again. So I volunteered for that, and I did that for a couple of days, and that was super special. And there's so many things. Like we could just talk about that for ages. But there's, just because you said it, there's also like there's a downside to everything. And I think one of my friends had a very good phrase, and he said, with my agency in Frankfurt, he was like, you've worked really hard for a very long time, and it's like you're on a small road and then you're getting on the highway. You're driving faster, you're making more money, things get easier, you're getting bigger clients. And he said, and now that you made it to the highway after investing 3-4 years into the agency, you're kind of like dropping out again. And that's really how it is, like in terms of making money and in terms of business. There's a big sacrifice in your career if you do something like this. And this is something we still struggle with a little bit, because you have that little gap in your bio. But I still, like me and my wife, we would still do it again. But it's not everything is sunshine. It's not that you're coming back and everything is before. You do have to explain to people. And some people think you're just lazy and you're just a bum going around the world. But we enjoyed it, and I would do it over and over again.
Well, if you look at it in the design space, for example, that you were in, like going to get some cultural exploration in to learn more about
Exactly.
and to get deeper into your craft, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You're going to bring in ideas from cultures that people would have otherwise never seen. So I think that's a very big importance of bringing in all that kind of information in to putting stuff forward, especially because what you know there is nothing compared to what you know somewhere else.
Yeah.
But so obviously surfing, and then when did this little foiling bug kind of nip you and then take that to the next step of launching your Instagram and stuff?
I was hooked. I was actually playing with the idea of foiling during my studies already. I made a few drawings, and my diploma as an industrial designer, you do have like a physical diploma where you design something. And I've like all my studies were just surfboards and experimental flexible structures of surf and foiling gear. So I kind of have a lot of drawings back then experimenting with foils. And the day I saw Lord Hamilton strapped to that air chair on like a snowboard binding going down Jaws, I was like, okay, that's it. That's going to be the next big thing. Oh, sorry for that. And yeah, I saw Lord Hamilton going down Jaws, was strapped onto that air chair. And then I kind of looked up, and I think one of the first companies was Nash and Go Foils, getting into foils. And I desperately tried to get my hands on a Go foil, which didn't really work out. And then I saw a guy bringing a kite foil in from the States, and it was on like one of the local harbors here, and it was strapped to a Mastercraft. And I knew the guy who owned the Mastercraft, so I called him up immediately, and it was like, hey, I just drove by your Mastercraft, and I saw there's like a foil board on the rack. And he's like, oh yeah, just a friend came by and he brought it from the States. And I was like, man, I need to have a go, like whatever it takes. And he was like, yeah, we're leaving right now. And I was like, oh, I'm there in a minute. So I went there, we went out, I got on the foil. It was like a tiny kite foil behind the boat. I've never foiled before. But I came up, I rode it for like, I don't know, 100 meters. It was absolutely unstable. But I knew straight away, I was like, oh, wow, this is it. And then I ordered something from the States. I think it was like a massive big chunk of one of the first. I think it was a slingshot Infinity 84 or something like that.
I learned on that.
Yeah. It was like, and it was clunky, and just the way it was designed was just... But yeah, I got hooked, and it's the difference between what you think is going to happen and what really happens. I tried to get into pump foiling. That was the first thing I actually did. And I went to like a dog, and I was like, yeah, it's going to be that easy. Like jump on it and just go. And it never happened, like never. And I was like, okay, I might just start with wing foiling, and got myself a wing. And it took another 2 years before I went back actually to dog starting and pump foiling.
I have about maybe an hour, maybe tops, maybe half an hour on pump foiling.
Oh,
I did an AWSI last September, and like Marley and the team from North were all down there, and was hanging out with those guys and trying it. And I got eaten like 12 times, but I will try. And we're going back in September, so I will definitely try that again and get a little bit more time on it. And it's... I've been like, I put up some videos of me ski foiling in essence, because my stance was all wonky. So a bunch of boys are like, come on, man, you gotta like. So anyway, switching that up made a big difference for pumping it here in Laventonic. So we got some really beautiful swell. If you ever got the opportunity to come out,
I will
and check out this swell. We rent a spot now for 6 months, and are here for the season, and it's pretty cool to see. There are a lot of people, there's a varying amounts of ages, but the swell gets really big, which is nice.
Yeah, so pumping is just, I think that's pretty European, because we don't have the swell, we don't have the big waves, and now every little pond, every river becomes a spot, and it feels like I'm surfing in my backyard. And you can do it. It's pretty. You don't have to rely on the wind or the waves. You can do it every time, everywhere. We just set up, like sometimes in the summer we get daylight till 10:30. So we just set up a ladder or two and just go for a pumping session, try to catch some tanker waves, and then go a few kilometers upstream on the tanker waves and come back. And I think pumping has one more benefit, which is the social aspect. If you do wing foiling, kite foiling, you're always more or less on your own. You can still talk to other people when you pass each other. But when you pump or dog starting, it's 6 or 7 guys that's laughing at one who's not getting away. And I think that's for me, that's a really big part in pump foiling, not only the sport itself, but meeting up with people. Sometimes we make a barbecue, or I always bring tea, some nice warm ginger tea. And then you just have a drink, have a little chit chat, and do some sport. And you can do it pretty much everywhere, and that's what I'm really enjoying. It's a great community, and we have a large surf community coming back in Germany, and it's all because of mainly, I think, wing foiling and pumping, because you can pretty much do it everywhere.
Now let's get into the weeds about Hopline. What is it?
Yeah.
What's its mission?
It's good. The mission is to become head of the world. No, it's maybe funneling my passion and my creativity. So I do like surfing, and I always wanted to make something like a kind of career and profession surf related. And at the same time, I've got this industrial design background, so I know about materials, about how things are made, and how many thoughts go into a product. And then I do like filming as well and being creative. And I mixed it all up, and I made a few videos. And I realized there's kind of a niche for me, being different and not showing myself in terms of being the greatest athlete, but just having fun, showing my passion, mixing it up with a few reviews and knowledge I have. And I think I'm good enough of a surfer to kind of judge things. I can say, okay, this works and this works. I'm not a professional. I don't do flips or anything. I might try these somehow, but I'm good enough to tell things apart, and I do have a good understanding of physics, and that's what's all going into Hopline. So it's a channel. It's mainly Instagram and YouTube right now. It's reviews, but at the same time, it's just things I absolutely do for myself. I have creative videos I just want to do. They are on my mind, and I just do them. Sometimes it takes me like 2 days to do a 1-minute reel, and no one's paying me for that. And at the end, people are like, why did you do it? And I was like, well, it was on my mind. I wanted to do it, and I love it. And sometimes I think I'm the only person laughing at it. It's like so many times it's got so many jokes in it. I'm already laughing while I'm filming it. And sometimes I have to stop because it's like the final product is already on my mind. And I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, and I'm not really good in making money from it. And I don't really have a business case. So a lot of people go like, what's your business case? Are you going to take money from the companies to make reviews? Are you going to get paid? I don't do any paid content, to be honest. For me, it's getting paid and doing a review just doesn't work. And I work with some brands. They don't pay me. Sometimes they do give me stuff for free. Most of the time I'll buy stuff or I have to send it back. And I'm not really, I do have to do it for the money at some stage. I'm not really know how, but I'm mainly driven by passion, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's how we started this. And then we had to find a way of paying all our subscription fees and all our bills and that kind of thing. And I think that's a natural kind of progression of where we go along. But so that makes sense, bringing in kind of that engineering kind of into those reviews, because not everybody is good at reviews, right? And how's the feedback that you've gotten so far on your reviews? Are companies coming back and saying they appreciate what you're doing, or how does that working from our side of the fence to their side of the fence?
I think I'm the other way around. Like a lot of people, they approach companies and they say, hey, can you send me something? I want to do a review or something. That's really hard. If you're like me, if your Hopline was like nothing, I think the first company I approached was Garmin, because I wanted like one of those fancy GPS watches, and I had like 11 followers. And no one's going to give you anything with 11 followers. And like right now, I'm tiny. I'm not even. I just learned that if you have 50,000 followers, you're a micro influencer, and I have like I think if you take YouTube and Instagram together, it's like 2,500. So it's like a niche within the niche, and even a smaller niche. So I just make content I want to make in terms of the gear I want to use, the creativity, and it's not what the brands want or like sometimes. But they do appreciate, I think, the effort and the quality I kind of put out. And then I think they're not always happy, I think, from their feedback. But it's I'm not doing it for the company. I'm doing it mainly for me and for the audience. And feedback from the audience is really good.
I think that's an important thing that you are doing. As with any industry, it doesn't matter what they're selling. People have to sell for their jobs, and they do get pushed very heavily by upper management to make sure that their gear is out there and their gear is the best. And regardless if there's any deficiencies in it, sometimes they get swept. So it's really nice to be able to offer that for people while working hand in hand with them on the other hand, because the brands are actually put it like this sport. I think we have 2 million users, I believe I found out.
Wow.
So it's not very big considering how many people are into surfing, how many people are into basketball, how many people are in like globally. It's a very small market, and you have a lot of brands who are putting a lot of R&D, and they work their butts off to put as much good gear out as possible, continuously refining. And I don't know what their margins look like, or I don't know how much money they're taking in, but I know it's probably not as good as surfing. You know what I mean? So we appreciate that. And the professional quality videos, and it's just cool to meet you, because it's interesting to meet people and talk to them and find a bit more about them when you see their reels all the time. So how old are you said you had 2 kids now?
I have 2 kids, yeah. They are 4 and 8. And it's different for me. Like, a lot of people think it's like if you compare a lot of influencers, they are young. It's a lot of competition, and it's a hard business. And I don't do a lot of competitions, and I don't see a lot of competition, because I'm just doing my thing. And if it's successful, I'm happy. If not, I'm happy too, because I've made that reel mainly for me. But having kids is just on another level. And everyone who's having kids, it takes up a lot of time. And I do love my kids. I spend a lot of time with my kids. And it's the same. We just came back from a 5-week surf trip from Thailand. And I'm going to put out a lot of videos now. And I didn't do it in Thailand on purpose, because I wanted to spend time with my kids. And then you got these young, super driven by the pressure of maybe some brands they have behind them, and they are on the phone every time, every single, and they push out content so quick and fast, which is good, but that's just not me. And I'm trying not to get into that competition. So I have a life, I've got a wife, I've got 2 kids, and I've got Hopline. So it's kind of, I have to get everything in a whole, and have time for all the other parts beside Hopline as well. But I'm not stressing myself, and because I don't have any contracts with companies, and I can say whatever I want to, and I'm making honest content and reviews, that's taking a little bit stress from me.
I think that's a good way of approaching it. I don't know how many young kids who are just it's a good thing to do, I think, at our age, to get into this as a hobby and then to grow it into something. But I'm not sure at 20 years old or 18 years old in something, if I don't we've talked a few times about the kind of content that brands are putting out, and I don't know, there's a tendency for them to use more highly sexualized selling of underage people, underage women, and that's bugged us. And we're like, how do we try to affect that in any way to push towards, because they're insanely good athletes. Insanely good athletes. And it's like, so they're using that. So they're using whatever tactics they can sell to sell gear. But I think the market that we're touching on is because our ideal demographic and the people who listen to the podcast are like 35 to 60. And they're wanting to have deeper conversations. They want to find out specifically why it is that I should be riding this swing versus another one. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with having kids and helping support them and helping nurture their growth But when it turns into that kind of a video with it's like, it's not as much of what we're looking like. That didn't tell me anything. And so that's where the quality of the content, and I've had this conversation with brands, and they do appreciate a deeper, longer form content about what it is that you're doing, and bringing in an industrial design aspect of it. It's like, we did this because of this, and this is how you're going to be able to enjoy in these conditions. I think that's super important, and we fill a very good niche market in doing that. And I think that should continue because it's important.
I
and it's clean.
Totally agree. And it's funny. I can tell, like, I've been only doing this for like Hopline for, I think, 2 years, but I've worked with some small companies that have been growing, and you can see how things change. Like at the beginning, when they are, it's surface for surface, like most of the companies, it's people that surf and they start to make gear. And then it turns into a proper company. So they, like you said, they have bills they have to pay, and it's getting more R&D, and they have to make money. And then some stick to the surface for surface, and some become more of a businessman. And then the communication and the cooperation you have are sometimes changing. Like you're making funny content at the beginning, some creative stuff, and later on they say, no, we can't post this, sorry. Or we can't collab. Like I'm still posting it because I haven't made it for the brand. I made it for myself, and I'm offering brands to use it if they want to. But I can see the change in companies growing. And like you said, they have different aims. They might do understand what we are doing, but I think it's very important that we have people like you, people like me, and other influencers that go for another perspective on the whole thing, and for like an elderly audience. And I think that's what you said, 35 to 60 years. That's exactly my audience. All the young kids, they watch different content. I think none of them is watching me, I guess.
Well, they're in their own world, and it's an amazing, fun world, and they get to be sponsored and have a few toys and do some experiences. The only thing that I was wanting to talk to a few brands about, I've talked to 2 so far, is just being careful of what you allow them to do. They're young. They don't understand that content stays up forever. They're traveling into a world that is not like our world when we were traveling. It was a lot more respectable back then. Now more and more things are coming out into the woodworks of things that are happening to people. And it's a legitimate concern when you see, like before when we were young, the only thing we could see, there was none of this content available because the internet didn't exist. Now it's flooded, and you're framing a young woman's mind as to what is the most important and what's going to get me the most attention. And this is what's going to get my satisfaction from brands. So, and I don't think there's many happily married men that'll be wanting to consume that kind of content. I'm sorry, but it's not true. And it doesn't really help us learn more about why one foil is better than next. So
it's nice. I think sometimes it's still because you said they are really good, like they're really top athletes. So they're doing some amazing stuff, but sometimes it's just the way they twist it because they know they're getting more clicks. I do see the point.
Clickbaiting us to then find out it's like, oh, it's paid. Oh, it's paid. I think that was the one thing that was the hardest for a lot of consumers, is to realize that more and more of the marketing put out by brands is not as authentic as we would have hoped it to be. It's always paid promotion by their athletes, which is great, but that's why it's pushing this entire genre for us to be a little bit more authentic with our thoughts and feelings, and to helping put out real information out there. So that's something that I can say that why this space is important for us to continue to grow, is the more and more a business gets more and more corporate, the more corporate their messaging is and the faker it becomes. So you have to be super careful. And I think that's where this opportunity is for Hopline, because I love the name. I think it's an amazing channel. Your content's great, and you put in a lot of time. So that's why we wanted to chat with you.
And I do get a lot of really good feedback from followers, from future customers and they ask me questions. Like I spend roughly an hour a day just answering questions, and I kind of like it. It's and they are down to the nitty gritty. It's like so many times they go like, oh, is this going to work? Can I take from one brand to the other brand? Can I interchange stuff? How far have I to move the mast forward if I use this board with this? And if you have a setup, and I surf a lot of different gear all over the year from different brands, and I do have a fair bit of knowledge about what works and what doesn't. And I know I can help them, like not in terms of selling, but in terms of really helping persons. And so many times they said, hey, should I buy this? And I always go like, what's your age? What's your level of profession? Where do you want to go? What do you have? Like, what kind of gear do you have? And so many times I'm like, no, you don't have to buy anything new. If you mix that up, if you take like the smaller board or maybe compensate with a bigger stabilizer or something, you will be fine. And a lot of people just go back to me after weeks or months, and they're like, hey, I've been doing what you recommended and it worked for me, and it still does. And it saved me like 3,000 euros for a new kit. And and that's really cool when people get back to me after a longer period of time, and they really appreciate that I'm not a sales person, but because I don't have the pressure of selling stuff, and I don't have the obligations from brands to push things into the market. And when I do get brands approaching me and saying, hey, would you do a review on this? And I was like, well, it's something I can try it, but probably I'm not going to use it because of this. It just doesn't fit me, which doesn't say it's not good, but it just doesn't fit me. And if it doesn't fit me, it's hard for me to make a review. And I'm not going to make a good review just because I get free stuff or they pay me for it. So that's something that's really important for me. And that's something I think most of my followers, or that's why they became followers, realize that when I say something, I'm really honest, and that's what they appreciate.
Do you find it's just your years of experience that lend you to more of the technical side of things? Because reviews and giving out information like that is not something that everybody is good at. Some people are like, they feel it feels great, but they don't understand what the nuances are behind the scenes. Like, how is it that you continuously develop those skills?
I think it's part of it is trying the physics. So I because I'm an industrial designer, I do go into the materials and just the way it is constructed and how the physics work within the system and the different materials. And then I have like different methods I use for myself. If I would go on a foil and put it on a board, I would just put some tape on the board to see where I have the mast position and where's what pressure point on the front foot and the back foot. And I would kind of try to look at it and look at the position of my feet and get like the perfect position. And then I would do the same just by pure feel. So I'm taking off any tapes, anything. I'm not looking at my feet, and I'm just bouncing around, pushing my feet forward, back foot just by the feel. And then I'm trying to put the feel and my thoughts and the physics all together, and then compare to like a million foils I've tried before. And that usually gives me a very good understanding of how a foil works or does not work. And not every foil works for me. Like I'm only 65 kilograms, and that's something I always have to take into account. Things that work for me might not work for someone else. So when a lot of people approach me and they say, hey, I'm 90 kilograms, I saw you're using that foil and that was looks absolutely amazing, I'm going to get that. And I was like, no, it's not going to work for you. You need something bigger or something different, or you have to compensate or do things like a little bit different. But I think it's the more time you spend on the foil and the more time you spend with different gear, the more knowledge you gain. And that's what I'm doing day in, day out. I had a pretty rough accident last year. So I only had, I think, 6 months on the water, but that was like close to 150 sessions. So that's a lot of time I'm actually on the foil learning, learning skills as well, but getting to know the little differences in material.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's amazing. How was the recovery process from that? Because I remember you posting that video. Yeah. I connected the two dots not that long ago, but I remember, how did that go?
Recovery is pretty good. Like broke. I think one was 5 and the other 3 times the foot, and it was both foots at the same time, which takes you out a pretty long time out of the water. I still feel it, especially in the cold German environment. Like I said, I just came back from a 5-week trip in Thailand. We had 30 degrees water and 38 degrees air. And that was just a different feel in my feet. Like if I get up in the morning, they are still a little bit stiff and I can feel the tension in the muscles, and warm water was way better. So I should move to Thailand or somewhere else. But I hope like the older you get, the longer it takes for a recovery. And I think at some stage, you're probably not going to recover 100%. So that's kind of rough. My oldest son, the 8-year-old, he just broke his leg, and it just took a couple of weeks, and he's now perfectly back, and he's not gonna have anything left from that little broken leg. So, but for me, I can still feel it even a year after now.
You should look into Feldenkrais method of somatic re-education. So somatics. There might be some somatic-based exercises, because I went through that motorcycle accident and I fell in. I had a background obviously in rehab and in kinesiology and stuff, so I can talk to you about a few little things afterwards that might help. Even some of the holistic side of things, to put different pressure points to get those feet to kind of re-engage. You never know, because when you get into something as catastrophic as I did, even though I was 26, you have to just find anything that works, right? And I find that we're so boxed here with traditionalism that we never look outside. And there's so many different little minor therapies that might help, but nobody knows and nobody talks about them. But,
I had a really good... Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I had a really good Thai massage in Thailand, and this guy was just amazing. And he was like, he felt it, and he was like, oh, there's a little bit of tension right here in your feet. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, should I work on it? Does it hurt? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, let me try something. And and that was just amazing. It was like, that was in the morning I went to the Thai massage, and in the evening I did my first beach start on like a pump foil board. And I think it's related, because he just did such an amazing job, and I just got more flexible. And that's what you need when you want to do a beach start. So there's a lot of things you can do. You just have to do it, and you have to know about them. So I'm really keen on getting some insights on that.
Yeah, what I found the most, it was just a mindset about achieving the goal, and it wasn't necessarily the goal. It was the fact that regardless of what you're learning, whether it's rehab, whether it's sport, whether it's anything, if you think it's possible and you open yourself up to getting information outside of what you're observing rather than making conclusions, I think that's one of the things that have helped my clients learn wing foiling as much is to break it down systematically and scientifically like you're doing it. And then there was one guy the other day that was just getting up, and he needed 3 tips, and then he was up foiling, and I got to experience that first foiling moment with him, which was pretty cool, right? To re-experience your first time foiling. But I think that's where the success is going to lie in Hopline, is doing that information, giving it out to people and being honest about it. And anyways, thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with us today. Yeah. Is there anything that you would want to put out there?
Not really. Happy if anyone wants to drop by on my channels. More than welcome to. Some fun stuff. So
what are they? For those who are new.
You mean the fun stuff?
Mm-hmm. No, sorry. What are your channels? It's just at Hopline, right?
It's a Hopline. If you just go Hopline on YouTube and Instagram, that's pretty much it. Like I said, there's going to be some pump clinics, hopefully. Mainly probably German-based, and I do usually speak German. A lot of people approach me and they said, hey, I would like to hire you, but my English is not that good. And then I was like, well, I'm German. We can talk German. And they're like, oh yeah, you're from Germany? It's like, that's funny.
Yeah, German's a hard language. But I want to get out there. Frank and Matt want me to come out and visit. I want to do Oktoberfest. That's what I want. I want some sausage and beer. No good.
It's okay, but it's like Disneyland.
Is it?
And it's not in October. It's in September. So a lot of people actually like the Oktoberfest is in September most of the time. So I've seen a lot of people, and they come to Germany in October for the Oktoberfest, but it's most of the time they do reschedule it from time to time. It's actually in September, so it should be Septemberfest. It's a big making money machine. And
right.
a lot of tourists. So there's actually a lot of nicer, smaller events in the area, which are way better than the original Oktoberfest.
Let's set it up. All right, we'll do it. We'll do it. All right, man. Thanks for joining. And all right, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.